let's get started. I actually wanted to shout out to Bishan and Kyle for taking some time to sort of apply what we've been learning and sharing on Slack. I think it's super awesome to see that you're practicing what we're learning, but also super good to see you share it kind of and get people's thoughts. So that's awesome, really good. All right, so today we're gonna do a reintroduction to systems thinking. I think systems thinking is one of those. It's sort of like a muscle. It's not like a skill that you learn once and you can just apply for the rest of your life. It's sort of something that you need to kind of keep building. And if you'll notice if you're working in with systems thinking and systems mapping and things like that, if you stop for 6 months and then come back, you need to kind of warm up again. So pretty much like a muscle. Thinking about systems thinking, visualizing complex systems and mapping relationships in a complex system. And I think, people have done pretty well actually for, some people it's been their first time kind of engaging with these things. So I thought we would kind of do a recap, do a couple of more activities using systems mapping and systems thinking and kind of iron out any questions or niggles that people have. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the Cynefin framework. Has anyone come across this framework before? Bishan, I know you have. Okay, cool. So you can check it out online. Basically, it talks about different types of systems, and it's less of a categorization system. It's kind of like it's not so much for any sort of it's not like a system that precedes the data, right? It's not a framework, sorry, that precedes the data. It's more like based on the data, based on what people have seen from their experiences in terms of what types of systems there are. This framework has sort of emerged. So it talks about like different types of systems. So it talks about simple systems, complicated, complex, and chaotic. And I think this is pretty important to understand because often people talk about or use the word complex as being difficult or being hard, but this is pretty useful in terms of understanding what a complex system actually means. So we'll talk about each of them. So simple systems are systems that are fully understood, right? You can predict like the cause and the effect relationship between it. So you can tell if this happens, then this will happen. And often there is one correct answer. So examples that I could think of are things like chemical formulas, maths, and cooking, right? A lot of cooking is like, you need to put it on this temperature for this long, or you need to put this much salt or this much pepper. And you can actually get like a repeatable process, both in terms of all those examples. So let's go to complicated systems. So complicated systems, people often confuse these with complex systems. They're potentially knowable. So not always, you can't always understand them, but potentially you can. The cause and time, like complex systems, they're often separated in time and space. There's multiple correct answers. And the big thing here is that you often need to rely on expert judgment, right? So like if you're flying a rocket to the moon, there is actually some science and some things behind that. It's not just, Abram coming with his software engineering background and saying, I reckon if you do this and this, you'll fly a rocket to the moon. Also, other examples are things like things that seem complex, but are actually complicated. So things like managing an airport or doing a brain surgery. So the important thing about this one is that you'll often need like experts to tell you how things are supposed to work or what you should be expecting. Complex systems, which are, complex systems are special for me because the most of the problems that I feel passionate about kind of exist in complex systems. So like we've said before, cause and effect are not repeatable, right? So just because, this thing happened 10 years ago and it caused this, that doesn't mean that, in tomorrow, if that thing happens, it'll have the same effect. Interventions will likely fail, right? So you actually need quite a bit of resilience because, if you kind of need to expect to fail almost because not everything you do will succeed. I made up a phrase called multi-safe experimentation, which basically like you need to do multiple experiments. One experiment, you're never going to have like a silver bullet that helps fix the problem. And you need to actually do safe experimentation, right? So it can't be something, people talk about like failing fast and failing quick, but there is some sort of failures that are just unacceptable, right? Like, killing someone by accident or things like that. And the focus here is on patterns and leverage points, right? Not fixing. You're not trying to fix the system because you can't actually design a system, or you can't design a complex system. What you can do is you can find leverage points, experiment with different ideas that you have and see what works and what doesn't. And I think Ruben a couple of weeks ago spoke about how in one size fits all approach is unlikely to work, right? Because just because something or a solution worked in Africa doesn't mean that it worked in Canada. And the big thing there is adapt. So you really need to kind of constantly learn, experiment and adapt. Learn, experiment and adapt. And examples are like raising a child. So I thought that was a pretty good example. So just because you've raised one child well and you have all that experience, it doesn't mean that the next child you will raise well. But also things like tackling climate change and societal problems, kind of like poverty or malnutrition or things like that. So last type of system, chaotic systems. So you can think of like, I guess coronavirus is kind of, having an epidemic is kind of pretty topical right now, or, having a bushfire, right? It's like, it's a crisis. You really need to just like respond. You don't have time to kind of say, oh, what do we think we should do, right? You would have had time in advance. Some people predicted there was going to be an epidemic and they might have been able to prepare for that. Same thing with bushfires. It's like predictable that will happen, but you just don't know when or where or how. And interventions focus on stability, right? So because it's like really unstable, really what you're trying to do is just like get as much control as you can of the situation, right? So like if it's a crime scene, you'll see the police like put a perimeter around the crime scene to try to control it. If it's a bushfire, you'll see government blocking roads and things so people can't access that. And kind of same thing with social distancing with coronavirus. So again, it's just trying to kind of get some sort of stability happening. Any questions before we do the first exercise?
Yeah, I'm guessing you're trying to gauge an entire system in this sort of 4-quadrant XY charts. It's not going to be any one of these things holistically, but a sort of blend, right?
Yeah, so some parts of the system will be simple, right? Like if you're studying the scientific community, right, you'll always be able to rely on like maths and chemical formulas, right? It's not like it's not like everything about the system is complex, but because you're studying, the scientific community, you really don't care much for the simple stuff, right? Because that's predictable. What you really want to focus on is the complex stuff, because that's the hard stuff, and that's where you can really make change. Any other questions? Cool. Hopefully that's a good sign. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about examples of systems. So I've kind of given some examples that I could think of, but if you visit the Miro board, you can go to the activity 1 board and then generate ideas for examples of different systems. And since we have a small group today, what we'll do is we'll just stay in one group, and feel free to share your thoughts in terms of what you think some complex systems are. So Kristen, if you click on my photo or the A, you should be able to kind of see where I am. Tom, what are you thinking in terms of different types of systems?
I mean, I guess a lot of my background would be similar to individual products, but they're much bigger. So I think one system could be an individual aircraft. So something like a Boeing 737. It's a complex system comprised of many different parts, many different functions. Overall, it's meant to get people from A to B.
Yeah.
But all the components and subsystems, we call them, to achieve that goal are kind of very complex on their own. So first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Well, do you think that's complex or complicated?
Probably complicated.
Yeah,
I
cool.
think the outcomes are knowable, and it's quite technical. So yeah.
Awesome. So. Cool. Kristen, what are you thinking?
I put 2 here. I put voting and elections. If you live in the US, that might be top of mind right now. But that's kind of, like there's so many moving parts to it and so many things that could happen and overlap. I wonder if it's complex or chaotic or in between. And then I also put in public transit. Which I think is complicated. I'm having a hard time recalling like the diagram you shared, but it's knowable and it can be predictable. So I'm trying to remember which one that should be.
Cool. Let me share it here for you.
Perfect. Yeah.
Is that hopefully that's a bit helpful. Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Kyle, Dawn.
I was going to put, or I'm trying to put education, like the school system. I'm not sure which one it would fit into. I'm thinking complex, but maybe that's not right.
What are you thinking about the education system?
Well, just with, well, like, I guess because of what's going on now here, well, everywhere really, but with children doing school at home, and just knowing that there are inequities where some children don't have the equipment they need to be able to get online to study properly. Just in it, I mean, in this country anyway, it varies. It depends on what school system you're in and what neighborhood you live in, what part of the country you're in terms of whether you're going to have access to the internet or if it's going to be reliable, that sort of thing. So when I'm thinking about what goes into making the decisions, and there are a lot of different, again, depending on your community and how, I guess, your school board or certain things are set up, it's going to vary, and there's all these different layers.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Awesome. I would probably argue it's a complex system. I mean, some parts of it are complicated, like if you wanted to say, for example, if you wanted to figure out, where to put a new school, that's probably something that's complicated. You probably want to like do projections around the population in a specific area. Whereas, if you want to focus, for example, on something like, decreasing education levels or improving education outcomes, then that's probably like a complex system type of problem.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because when you were talking about adapt, I was thinking that that's sort of what we're doing now, is adapting, like, to children taking classes at home and their parents are working in the next room and things like that. Just always changing, and every 10 years there's like a new idea about how to do something that was probably similar to how it was done 30 years prior, but everybody forgets and then they try it again.
That's pretty typical. Awesome. Hey Matt, Thanks for joining us. We're just on Miro. We're talking about examples of complex, complicated, chaotic, and simple systems. Let me know if you don't have access, and I'll share the Miro board in the chat. Cool, awesome. Yeah, these look pretty good actually. Some examples that I never thought of, like a doorknob or a ticket vending machine. Cool, awesome. Has everyone put their ideas down? Is everyone happy to go to the next part? Awesome, sounds good. Let me share my screen again. Awesome, so that was pretty good. So there's obviously multiple ways of understanding complex systems. Today, we're just going to talk about stocks and flows, right, as a way of mapping systems. I think this is probably one of the simplest ways of mapping a system because it's usually pretty intuitive, or at least, it has simple building blocks that you can kind of map something pretty complex with. So we have two or three types of building blocks. One is a stock, right, or a factor, right? And I'll give you some examples of that. And then the other one is a positive or a negative flow, right? Or something that, contributes to a factor or something that takes away from a factor. So for example, let's say we're trying to save. We have, the amount of savings that we have, that's a factor or that's a stock. And then we have the amount of interest that we get, and that's a stock, right? And then, we have flows, like positive flows between savings. So the more saving we have, the more interest we get. And the more interest we have, the more savings we get. And we call that a reinforcing loop because it's, constantly kind of going in a positive direction. The other example that we have that kind of works and kind of doesn't, but it's like food, energy, and exercise as the stocks. The more food you have, the more energy you get. The more energy you have, hopefully you exercise, but you might just sit on the couch. And then the more exercise, the less energy you have, the less. I would actually say this is probably a positive. I'm going to struggle to rotate it here because everyone's watching. But I would say, the more energy you have, the less food that you have. Or the more you need food, or, you can kind of introduce, say, like a second thing that's like hunger, right?
No, the more energy you spend, you need more food. The more you exercise, the less energy you have. The less energy you have, you need more food to build the energy.
True. That's a good way of thinking about it, actually.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I guess the problem the trap that I fell into with this, right, is that I didn't specify whether energy means you have energy or energy means you're low on energy, if that makes sense. But yeah, any questions, or can anyone think of any other examples? I know before we map things like conflict or learning a new skill, does anyone want to share any sort of things they learned from that?
It's pretty straightforward.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to map a complex system. And I want you to, so if you've chosen a problem before, like I think Bishan, before you focused on conflict, I want you to focus on something else. And then what we want to do really is just the first step is to identify factors and stocks that relate to that problem or that relate to your outcome. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll split you into groups. So for example, if you're learning new skills, you just want to talk about, factors that mean that you're more likely to learn a new skill, or factors that mean that you're less likely to learn a new skill. Yeah. So for example, the more time I have, the more likely I am to learn a new skill. Or, the more responsibilities I have, the less likely I am to learn a new skill. Does that make sense? Awesome. So
you want me to pick conflict again, or you want me to
no, pick a different one.
Pick a different one. Okay.
Yeah.
Learning a new skill, probably.
Cool. Awesome. I will split you into 2 groups, and we'll go for 10 minutes.
Just learning a new skill is like the prompt or the landscape.
Hello.
Yeah,
Are you
just
focused
put
on
that
learning a new skill?
Yeah,
Cool. Awesome. I put that here for you.
I'm just gonna do that. Cool. I also wonder if so I wonder if we should map like the flows, right? So like if we look at time, with more time, we have time to learn a new skill, but the learning a new skill kind of takes away our time.
Oh yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
let me find the little arrow guy. Let me connect these here. We just tap.
So I would
That.
say, I think you're right, Kristen, in terms of, there's things that, kind of have like double relationships. I would say focus on just brainstorming all the factors you can think of that contribute
cool.
to learning a new skill. And then it'll be really easy to like talk about, okay, how does this, like, what are the relationships between them?
Perfect.
Awesome. Ping me if you need anything, but otherwise I'll go to the other breakout room.
Which leads to
Hello.
Hey, Abraham.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I would say try to focus first on just identifying all the factors that contribute or take away from learning a new skill, and then it will be much easier to.
Take away from learning, is it?
Yeah. So add to like things that increase the chances or prompt you to learn a new skill, and things that take away from that. And then you can focus on the relationships, because I think if you kind of start mapping relationships first before you identify the factors, what happens is that you kind of get stuck just mapping, one flow, if that makes sense, as opposed to mapping like different relationships.
Okay, cool. I think that sounds perfect.
Cool. Awesome. Sounds good.
Okay. Okay. So I think we've already said time is a factor that takes away from learning. So we'll make this. How do we, okay, so we don't need to color it right now, correct, Abraham? We don't need to do anything. We just need to identify.
Yeah, you just need to write.
Probably I would also put money here, just in case.
Cool. I'll see you guys in 5 minutes.
Okay, sure. Thanks.
So talk me through kind of what you were, what was kind of intuitive and what was a bit difficult.
So I would like to go first. We tried to, we did not think about what is negative or positive. We were just trying to look at the keywords that define what learning a new skill would mean before and after learning a new skill.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing that we did, and we came out with fees, time, and work-life balance and the other keywords, and then we sorted them out based on what is positive and what is negative. So we did not specifically look for something which was positive or something which was negative, but we defined that after we had all the keywords on the board.
Yeah, cool. What did this approach kind of yield anything that you didn't think would be related to learning a new skill? Like, were there any unexpected sort of factors that you thought of?
Although it was very apparent, but I thought professional networking was something that I completely missed out, and Don said we need to put it there because we generally don't think in terms of coming together for professional networking, but it happens by the way.
Yeah.
Your main focus is on learning a new skill.
But it's kind of like a positive byproduct of learning a new skill.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds good.
You're unaware, but it happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, kind of like this group, right? Like we're unaware in a way, but we're sort of creating these networks between people that, you know, come and join.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome.
Matt brought something up that was cool in our group. It was like that the skill, he called it recursive, right? It's like as you practice a new skill, Siri just tried to listen to me. As you practice a new skill, it's like the more you practice it, the less it's a new skill, and then it's just like what you do or something you do.
Yeah.
And then that new skill becomes like something that you can build upon for other skills, right? So
yeah,
I thought
cool.
that was really interesting and more a different lens than I was thinking about. I like that.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting, actually. Awesome. Any other thoughts? Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our groups again, and this time we're going to start mapping the relationships. So often when I do this exercise, what will happen is as I start mapping the relationships, I'll also think of other factors. So whatever factors you can think of while mapping the relationships, feel free to introduce them as well. Yeah, and we'll take again 15 minutes to go through that, and I'll join each group just to make sure you're all good. How's that sound? Awesome. All right. I've opened the room, so you should be good to go.
Yeah, so that's interesting, isn't it? So
yeah, I would think that a person who's willing to learn a new skill for a job promotion wouldn't mind losing work-life balance. But here's the thing, you know, I'm in a dilemma right now. So I would go with negative. Okay. But it works both ways. Like if I'm willing to spend 1 hour learning a new skill, I don't mind staying away from my family for that 1 hour.
Yeah.
It depends on which perspective you're looking at.
No, I think you're right. So, I mean, I did a Cert 4 a couple of years ago. And so I worked like 3 hours on Wednesday and Thursday nights to attend classes, right? So that took away from my work-life balance in order to do that.
Right.
So
you had zero work-life balance.
Yeah, it did give me some greater satisfaction from certain jobs that I went on to in future. So, you know, that's a hooking around kind of influence that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, good. And
oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dawn.
Sorry, Dawn.
No, I was just thinking, if you know it's for a finite period of time, it helps too. Like, you know, okay, I just got to get through this course in 6 months or maybe 2 years, and then I will have, you know, either the certification or the degree. I think if you know there's a light at the end of the tunnel, then it helps you get through it.
Exactly. Which was my point, that if you're willing to learn something new, then you're also willing to sacrifice time or work-life balance.
So I think maybe, Dawn, like what you're suggesting, a positive influence of learning new skills, having a plan for it might be a good idea, so that you know how long you're in it for, as opposed to it being open-ended. But
right.
Might be another factor we want to think of.
Exactly.
Because I think planning is probably a positive impact on most things, because without it, a lot of stuff doesn't actually happen in general, right? Planning, I think is rarely a negative thing unless people over plan, but which I've seen happen in some big companies before.
You think you need to be specific on planning, because planning sounds very general? Planning what?
Could go curriculum or something like that.
Okay. Could we? Yeah, because I'm still thinking.
Or schedule, perhaps, is what you're thinking of.
Yeah. something that relates to, because planning is very general. Are you planning your time to learn a new skill, or are you planning your planning to learn something new? Are you planning to make more money?
I think
Because it could
it's a,
apply to everything.
yeah. So I think it's mainly to do with schedule, because
Schedule, yeah.
you're not going to sign up to learning a new skill unless you know that you have the time to do it, or you have
Time
the
to do
time to
it.
commit to learning to it, or you have, I guess you could say, budget in there. You have enough to pay the fees for it if it costs something, things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
You learn it, you get a job. Yeah. But you need to schedule. Yeah.
So I think online
You
learning
think
is
time?
probably
Yeah.
sorry, go
You
on.
think time? Yeah. You think time would have a positive impact on schedule? Because now that you know that you're going to spend time learning a new skill, you're now in a good position to schedule your time.
Yeah, maybe it's the other way around. Schedule has an impact on time because it's
Okay.
specifically contained. It's just the first thing that comes to mind. But
okay, online learning will have a online learning will have a positive
yeah,
because now you're able to do learn a new skill at your own pace.
yep. It's a tool that lets you learn a new skill. So it's a positive enabling kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm really liking this discussion in terms of, because it helps you kind of drill down, like what are the assumptions that we kind of, in our heads but not spoken, and that's really important. I
So
find
this is
that's like
brilliant.
one of the big sort of cool things about like system mapping is like, even though we have very similar life experiences, we make different assumptions as to, like what's the impact of time, or how does learning impact work-life balance. So this is
Yeah, there's a whole lot of I think there's a whole lot of cultural influence which we as a team are trying to overcome while doing this exercise.
yeah.
Knowing that we three people are from three different geographies and we're trying to see where we can meet eye to eye, sort of. So this exercise also helps the team to kind of link with each other, in terms of ideas and thoughts.
Absolutely.
It's not just the assignment that is there right now.
Cool. I'll let you keep going for 2 more minutes, and
okay.
I'll go to the other group. Shout out if you need anything. I'm around.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. How's it going?
Good. We see you in there cleaning up our lines. You don't like them?
Well, it's easier if you want to change your thing. Like, that's all.
I'm just teasing.
I have a tiny bit of OCD as well, so that doesn't help. How are you going in terms of the like mapping the relationships?
I think pretty well. I feel like we might be a little afraid that it's not complicated enough.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Hey, that's like an interesting reflection, actually, Kyle. In terms of like, we're trying to map like a complex thing. Why doesn't it look complicated?
Yeah, as we keep going through stuff, it's like it kind of falls into time, physical resources, incentive. There are a couple nuances that are unique and interesting employment opportunities that sort of tie in that we want to call out, and the recursive mastery that those are kind of cool that we want to call out. But if we we're at the right altitude, it could kind of all fall into some very high level buckets and
Yeah.
should be
Yeah.
very
And
similar.
I think the other cool thing is, and we'll get to do it today, it's kind of like, what's the narrative that we're trying to share with this system map?
Mhm.
Because I think like the system map by itself, even though it's useful, you almost need like a narrative to guide people through your thinking. Otherwise, it's just like, cool, everything's connected. What am I supposed to do with that?
Right.
All right, I'll give you 1 more minute and then I'll call you back. Shout out if you need anything, but I'm around.
Cool.
So how was that actually? First of all,
It's good.
Quite cool.
good. Awesome. That's good to hear. So what we're gonna do next? First is I want to hear sort of like what things did you find have interesting relationships between, different things or that kind of influence learning a new skill. And then I'll talk to you about the next activity. Who wants to go? Matt, do you want to go?
I think you should ask the other members honestly, because I just been observing them, and I think for me, as a first-time viewer of like positive and negative feedback loops, it is quite interesting to see the relationships between the things, but I'm not exactly sure what they mean necessarily, and how, like you said, the narrative that it produces, and yeah, I like to see the insight of other people, to be honest, in regards to that.
Awesome. Thank you. Kyle or Kristen, do you want to share your thoughts?
Sure. So one thing that jumped out at me, we started talking about a number of different incentives, and then we talked about the possibility of getting into positive or negative reinforcements that was driving, is your job becoming obsolete? Is work not working out? Do you not want to suck at the thing that you do anymore? Is that going to push you versus, is there more money out there? Is there something cool, something that's attractive that you just want to get into? But it just depended on the level of detail or the level of fidelity that we wanted to get into to start mapping into that. And so that's kind of where, for the amount of time that we had, we kind of just let it be flagged, but left it as incentive.
Awesome. That's a powerful skill, to kind of like know there is more to explore, and just being able to say like, now is not the time for it. Cool. Because a lot of people kind of get stuck into the process without like the thinking behind it. So yeah, I wanted to call that out. Awesome. Tom, do you want to share what your team have been working on?
Yeah, so we kind of just teased with the bubbles that we already had, and a few new ones kind of developed, things like schedule and developing friendships through learning a new skill. So we had a couple of loops, not rather than just bubble to bubble, but learning a skill requires money, usually in fees, probably to do something like that. But if that allows you to attain a better job, then it may give you more money. So that kind of is a payoff. So you can kind of see that relationship there. We got into scheduling as well. That has a positive impact on basically anything, because you need to have a plan for doing it, and then that allows you to use your time a little bit more resourcefully. It's interesting that none of these events actually had other than scheduling, can give you more time in a way, because there's only so much of it in existence.
Yeah. I guess.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I guess being dissatisfied with your current job, you might kind of get a bit lazy, you know what I mean? So you might all of a sudden manage to create time for yourself, like during your workday. Just something that I've, as I'm talking to more people who kind of want to move, like change careers or things, it's like, actually I can learn this thing while I'm, working. Cool. Awesome. So one thing actually, Tom, that you kind of brought to mind is, these maps, you often don't want to think of like this causes this, which causes this. You actually want to often kind of think in loops, like how do these you know, kind of like what you were saying. It's like, how does time, for example, relate to online learning, right? So for example, we could say that because you're online, you don't have to travel. So you can save a bit of time in terms of like how much time it actually takes to learn that skill. So
Yeah, definitely.
awesome. So it's, yeah, really good to see the work that each team has been doing so far. So then next, for the next 5 minutes, what we want to do is you can use it to refine your map, but I also want you to focus on crafting your narrative. Like, what's the narrative that you're trying to say with this map? Okay, if you were going to kind of, you know, present it back, what would be the narrative? And this is going to be helpful for in a few ways. First of all, it's going to, you know, get you to exercise, you know, to craft a narrative around the system map, which is often like one of the best ways of actually sharing a system map. You never just share a system map and say, here it is, because people don't understand your thinking that way. So we're going to craft narrative. And then next week, what we're going to do is we're actually going to start kind of creating hypotheses and saying, you know, we think if we do this, then, you know, that will help us learn a new skill, or that will help us resolve conflict. And crafting a narrative will also help, you know, people who join next week in terms of understanding your thinking behind the specific map that you created. So yeah, so the big focus for the next 5 minutes is going to be crafting narrative, and then yeah, pick a team member to kind of share back what that narrative is. Cool. How's that sound?
Cool.
Awesome. I'll take you back. Awesome. Thanks for coming back. So yeah, we want to hear, I guess, from one or two people from each team just to share about, you know, what's their narrative or what's their story of what they've been mapping.
I can speak for our team. We didn't write as good a summary as the other team. And we can expand upon that. I'm just being a little lazy, I think. So our scenario, or our like story, is that we want to really define the return on investment for learning a new skill. So like just the desire to learn a new skill and to the ability to learn a new skill. If it's just kind of turning into a, you know, waste, or we're kind of throwing out that skill, or it's not doing better, like making the world better, whatever it is that ROI we're looking for, right, really needs to be defined here. If we're not making more money, then this kind of system helps us decide, like, is this new skill worth learning? And if not, like, let's move on. And if so, like, these are all the things that should be part of it, right? The green lines should be part of it.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you. Sounds good. Can we hear from the other group?
Yeah, so I can leave in here, like Kristen said, it was very similar. This whole thing is about making a decision about whether we're going to learn this new skill or not, and perhaps consider why we want to learn it. So, you know, you're dissatisfied with your job, you want more money. So what you can see from this, what are the positive outcomes from learning a new skill, and what are the things it's going to cost me in terms of time or money or stress or whatever. From that exercise, you may be able to find ways to mitigate those bad aspects, like scheduling, you know, make sure the time is planned properly, but also, you know, learning a new skill might get you a better job that might earn you more money, which thus offsets the cost of the course itself. So it's basically about laying down all the aspects and making the call, you know, how bad are some of these blobs badder than others or better than others, and then you weigh it up.
Awesome. Perfect. That sounds pretty good. Thanks for taking the time to share your narrative, because I think that's, you know, without sharing narrative, people kind of miss out on, you know, what's the story you sort of want to tell me. So what we're going to do next is one small step. I think I've settled on that name, but feel free to make a suggestion. So every week we kind of, you know, commit to taking some sort of action, and then we you know, come back and say, you know, this is how we went, and plan for the next week. So again, you'll find it on the Miro board. You can, if you weren't here last week or the week before that, then feel free to just create a new action and share what you're going to learn. So, and we can do that in public. So let me go to last week's one small step. So for example, what did I say? Oh yeah. I said get examples of visuals that are too complex and create a visual description of different types of systems. So I did pretty well on that. I'm still kind of going at it, and then I'll share it on Slack once that's done. So I would say my action for this week is just to finalize that, and yeah, and then share it on Slack. Who else wants to talk about their one small step from last week and what they're planning to do this week?
Last week I was reading through this UX book that I have about the principle of accessibility in design. So making designs accessible to people who don't necessarily have the same senses or abilities as the rest of us are, whether it's colorblindness or you're handicapped in some way. So what I'd like to do next week is to find, in my day-to-day job, areas where that might be applicable. So
awesome. That sounds pretty fascinating. Feel free to share your kind of what you're learning, Tom, on Slack. It'd be good to hear. Awesome. Anyone else?
About what we are going to do next week, or what we did last week?
Yeah, well, what you did last week and what you're going to do next week. Yeah, both.
Oh, I already posted what I'm going to do next week, which is to visualize the falling in love system. It's going to be interesting. For last week, I already posted that exercise on Slack. And I thought it was pretty demanding. Let me be honest with you, because I thought after having a chat with you, Abraham, I thought there's so many sides to it that I completely ignored. And maybe in the upcoming sessions, we might have a look at it. The multiple views, basically, that's one part that I wanted to have a chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a big part of that is testing it with other people who have different perspectives in the system. But yeah, we can definitely talk about that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good work. Kyle, how did you go with your map? I still haven't read your blog post fully.
You might as well wait for the movie. Yeah, that was my small step. I kind of wanted to do a retro for myself to kind of identify what worked and what didn't work going through that, and then see if there was any feedback or any questions. Would love to hear or get into discussion about that. But I haven't presented it out at work yet. I've gotten feedback at work, and so far it's been promising. But we will see. It's introducing a whole new thing, and it's challenging a lot of other things.
Cool. Awesome. I'll make sure I read your reflections. Cool. I think that marks the end of the session. Feel free to reach out during the week. Obviously, I think everyone here should be on Slack. But yeah, it was good to see everyone, good to connect again and hear your perspectives. And yeah, shout out if you have any ideas. And we'll see you next week.
Cool.
Sure.
Thanks, Evan.
Take
Cool.
care.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks,
everyone. Bye-bye. Take care.